We were barely a squad out of the drop zone before the blast hit. The world around us exploded in a firestorm of noise and heat. My helmet rattled violently, the weight of the impact slamming into my chest as though 1,000 tons of steel had been dropped on me. My vision flashed white for a brief second, an intense, burning light searing through my senses. When it finally cleared, I found myself sprawled on the ground, disoriented and gasping for air, my heart hammering in my ears. The squad had been in high spirits before the drop. We were a group of seasoned soldiers, veterans of a dozen different combat zones, and we had trained for this. We knew how to handle anything. At least, we thought we did. The mission was clear, a standard raid on an enemy stronghold on a distant world, followed by a quick extraction. The kind of thing we'd done 100 times before. The only problem was, we weren't the ones doing the raiding anymore. The tables had turned, and in an instant, we became the ones who were being hunted. I tried to raise my comms, but all I got was static. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal and the faint, acrid tang of ozone. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, but my eyes felt heavy, as if the weight of the air itself was trying to pull me back into unconsciousness. When I pushed myself up, I saw the others scattered around me, some already on their feet, others still lying motionless. The rest of the team, Sergeant Ruiz, Corporal Thompson, and Private Campbell, all seemed to be alive but dazed, disoriented like me. The battle had been fierce, but it had ended too quickly, too abruptly. We'd been ambushed. The enemy had known we were coming, and they had made sure to strike first. The ground around us had been littered with the wreckage of our ship, burning husks of metal and debris scattered across the terrain. The blast had hit from above, and in the chaos, we hadn't even seen them coming. I managed to push myself to my feet, my legs unsteady as I scanned the horizon. Above me, I could see the ships, but they were nothing like the enemy craft we were accustomed to. These were sleek, dark, and alien. They moved with a precision that felt almost surgical. There were no gunships or fighter jets, just massive, hovering vessels that cast an eerie shadow over the battlefield. I could hear the faint hum of their engines, a strange, unsettling sound that seemed to vibrate deep within my chest. Then the ground rumbled again, a deeper, more ominous vibration, and I realized we weren't alone. The air shifted, and before I could fully register what was happening, I felt the metallic grip of something cold and strong clasp around my arms. I tried to struggle, but it was useless. The alien hands were too powerful. With one swift motion, they hauled me into the air, dragging me from the ground and lifting me up toward the towering ships above. The last thing I saw before being pulled into the ship was Corporal Thompson, trying to fight back with a knife, his movements frantic and desperate. But he was no match for them. They didn't even flinch as they closed in. I wanted to scream, to shout at him to run, but the grip on me tightened, cutting off my air. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I fought it, struggled against the suffocating hold, but it didn't matter. The darkness swallowed me whole. When I came to, I was in a haze. The world spun around me in a blur of dark shapes and sounds, a low hum echoing in my skull. My chest felt heavy, constricted, and I struggled to breathe, as though something was weighing down on me. I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my mind, but the harsh light from above only intensified the throbbing in my head. I wasn't alone. I could hear the low groans of others, the rustling of bodies moving, and the faint, distant sound of voices. It took a few moments before my surroundings started to come into focus. I was no longer on the battlefield, no longer in the wreckage of our ship. Instead, I found myself in a vast, circular arena. The floor was hard and barren, covered with dust and bloodstains. My hands were bound, wrists pressed painfully against cold, unyielding metal. But I was too disoriented to fully comprehend why or how. I tried to push myself up to survey the area, but my head swam with dizziness. My muscles felt weak and sluggish, like they were fighting through a thick fog. The air was thick and oppressive, a metallic tang hanging in the atmosphere that burned at the back of my throat. I inhaled sharply, trying to steady my breath, but it didn't help. It was the smell of something alien, something not of this world. As my vision cleared, I took in my surroundings fully, my pulse quickening. The arena was vast, stretching out far beyond my line of sight. It was a bowl-shaped structure made of smooth, gleaming black metal that seemed to absorb the light. Massive walls curved up around us, tall and imposing, seemingly endless. At the top of those walls, floating orbs emitted a harsh, unnatural light, casting everything in a dull, sickly glow. The ceiling, if you could even call it that, was nothing but open space, and the air seemed to hum with a strange energy, like it was alive. The strange thing wasn't just the size or the design of the arena. It was the audience. In the farthest reaches of the stadium, sitting high in the shadows, were rows upon rows of alien spectators. They were unlike anything I had ever seen, tall, sleek, and covered in dark, chitinous armor. Their eyes glowed an eerie green like the light of a distant star. Their faces were angular, almost insect-like, with sharp, unnatural features. Their expressions, if they had any, were unreadable. The silence among them was deafening, oppressive. I wasn't the only one here, I realized. Other human soldiers, my squad mates, were scattered across the arena, each slowly regaining consciousness. Sergeant Ruiz was sitting against one of the walls, his hand pressed to his forehead as if trying to shake off the confusion. Private Campbell was on his knees, looking around in disbelief, as if unsure whether he was dreaming. Corporal Thompson, ever the hard-ass, was already on his feet, though he seemed just as disoriented as the rest of us. None of us spoke at first. We were all trying to process what had happened, trying to make sense of the situation. The last thing I remembered was the explosion, then the aliens grabbing me. There was no explanation for why we were here, no reason for this. All I knew was that we had been captured, and this was no place of mercy. The feeling of hopelessness clawed at me, but I fought it down. I had no time to waste on despair. We had to think, had to plan. A low, rumbling voice boomed from somewhere deep within the arena, a sound that reverberated in my chest. It was harsh and alien, like it had been transmitted through some deep mechanical system, but it was clear enough. Its words were simple, almost chilling in their finality. The humans have been captured. The hunt begins. The words echoed, and before we could react, the arena floor began to shift beneath our feet. Massive doors on the far side of the arena opened, and from the shadows, strange, monstrous creatures began to emerge. Some were crawling, others were stalking on 4 legs, but all were predatory, their forms built for destruction. They growled and hissed as they entered the arena, their eyes glowing in the darkness like the audience that watched us. My mind raced. The hunt? What kind of twisted game was this? It wasn't long before I realized the truth. We weren't here for any sort of trial or interrogation. This was a game to them, a twisted spectacle for the amusement of these alien creatures, and we were the players. No, the prey. The realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just some alien invasion. This was something far worse. We had been thrown into an arena, and we had only one choice: survive. The air in the arena felt thick, suffocating almost, as though the walls were closing in on us. My heart pounded in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears as I tried to steady my breathing. The creatures, whatever they were, had not yet moved in, but they were circling the arena like predators waiting for their prey to make the first move. I could feel their eyes on us, each gaze a cold, calculating weight pressing down on my shoulders. The audience above us was silent, too silent. There was no cheering, no shouting, only the soft hum of their strange, eerie technology that filled the space. I glanced around, trying to get my bearings. The rest of my squad was in the same state of shock, though I could see the determination slowly setting into their eyes. There was no getting out of this. no surrender. We weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting for a chance to escape whatever twisted fate these aliens had planned for us. And that meant we had to stay alive long enough to figure out how to turn the tables on them. Then the voice came again, its booming resonance reverberating through the arena, sending a chill down my spine. The hunt begins. I didn't need to be told twice. The words were simple, but they held a terrifying finality to them. As if on cue, the gates at the far end of the arena creaked open, and from the darkness, the first creature emerged. It was massive, at least 10 feet tall, with armored plates running down its back like a centurion's shield. Its eyes glowed bright yellow, and its teeth, long, jagged fangs, gleamed as it hissed in the low, guttural growl. It looked like some sort of insect crossed with a reptile, its body covered in sleek chitinous armor that made it look almost invulnerable. The thing's elongated arms reached forward, its claws scraping the arena floor as it advanced toward us. My first instinct was to back up, but there was nowhere to go. The arena was a pit, and the walls were high and unforgiving. The only way out was through the door on the opposite side, but even that seemed like a distant hope. "Weapons," I heard Sergeant Ruiz mutter under his breath, his voice hoarse but determined. He had already unholstered his sidearm, his fingers trembling as he checked the magazine. "We've got to fight back," I said, my voice hoarse as well. "We're not dying in some damn arena for their entertainment." The soldiers nodded, and for a moment, there was a flicker of unity among us. We were soldiers, trained for the worst of situations. But this was something else entirely. We weren't in a battlefield anymore. We weren't even on Earth. We were trapped in a twisted game of survival, with rules we didn't understand, and an enemy that was not only stronger, but far more prepared than we were. The creature took another step forward, its eyes scanning us as it advanced. It didn't rush toward us. Instead, it moved with the surety of a predator, savoring the moment. It knew we were trapped, knew it had all the time in the world to toy with us. But as it neared, I noticed something we could use. Its movements were deliberate, slow, and those armored plates on its back, while impressive, didn't seem to cover every part of its body. The underbelly, the legs, the sides, they were all vulnerable. We had a chance, but only if we could land a hit. "We go for the underbelly," I whispered to Ruiz, my eyes locking with his. "Focus fire on the joints and the soft spots." He nodded, his face a mask of determination. We'd trained for everything, but we hadn't trained for this. This wasn't a human enemy, not one we could predict, not one we could negotiate with. But if there was one thing humanity was good at, it was adapting. The creature lunged. It was fast, too fast, and before we could even raise our weapons, it had closed the distance. Its claws swung down like a scythe, aiming for the nearest soldier. Thompson ducked just in time, the claws missing by inches, but the force of the swing sent him crashing to the ground. He rolled, quickly regaining his footing, but the creature was already on him again. Without thinking, I raised my gun, firing off a few quick shots at its side, aiming for the exposed gaps in its armor. The rounds hit, but they didn't penetrate deep enough to make a difference. It howled in frustration, swiping its claws at me, forcing me to dive out of the way. "Stay focused," Ruiz shouted, covering me as I scrambled to my feet. We had no time for hesitation. There was no plan B, no backup. This was it. This was our fight for survival. The creature was relentless, but we could see its movements were starting to slow. Maybe it was the pain from the bullets, or maybe it was starting to realize we weren't just helpless humans. Either way, we had its attention now. We kept moving, dodging and firing, targeting its joints, its exposed underbelly. It wasn't easy. The creature's speed and strength were overwhelming, and every move we made felt like a gamble. But we didn't stop. We couldn't. The aliens above us weren't going to give us a second chance. We were alive, and we were going to stay that way, no matter what. The battle raged on, and for the first time since we'd been thrown into this nightmare, I felt a flicker of hope. We weren't just fighting to survive anymore. We were fighting back. We had a plan, and it was working. The creature had finally taken a hit. The force of our combined attacks had driven it to stumble, its movements less controlled, less sure. We'd found a weakness, and we were pressing it. But even as I fired again, watching the beast stagger from another hit, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. The creatures we were up against were not just mindless animals. No, they were something else, something intelligent. Their strength, their speed, it was all calculated. They were playing a game with us, and they knew how to win. But we weren't going down that easily. I could see the determination in the eyes of my squad mates, even as exhaustion began to creep in. Every movement took effort. Every step was a gamble. Ruiz and Thompson were working in sync, covering each other, moving in perfect unison. Campbell, despite his earlier hesitation, had found his resolve, using his rifle with deadly precision. The way he moved, he wasn't just trying to survive anymore. He was hunting, and that's what we all had to do. The creature growled in pain as Thompson landed another hit to its leg joint, but instead of retreating, it charged with renewed fury. Its claws swiped through the air, aiming for Thompson, but Ruiz was already there, tackling him out of the way just in time. The beast's claws scraped across the ground with a terrible screech, sending sparks into the air. The sound made my teeth grit, but we kept moving, kept fighting. My mind raced. We had to take it down, and we had to do it now. But the longer we fought, the more I realized that these creatures weren't just monsters. They were a part of something much bigger. This was more than just an arena. It was a test, a trial, a spectacle. The way the aliens watched from above, the eerie silence that filled the air, it all pointed to something far more sinister. We weren't just gladiators in their twisted game. We were specimens, experiments, and the arena was their testing ground. But that thought could wait. We had to win this fight first. The creature was starting to tire. Its movements were becoming more erratic, its breathing heavier. It was hurting, and it was angry. But we couldn't afford to make a mistake. One wrong move, and it would be over. We had to exploit its weakness before it could recover. "Now!" I shouted, signaling to the team. The others nodded, knowing exactly what I meant. Ruiz and Campbell moved in from either side, drawing the creature's attention, while Thompson and I took aim. I could feel my pulse thudding in my ears, but I forced myself to focus, blocking out everything else. We only had one shot at this. The beast turned to face Campbell, its claws raised, and in that split second, I saw it. The soft spot beneath its arm, just under the shoulder joint, where the armor was thinner. Without hesitation, I took the shot. The blast rang out, the bullet tearing through the creature's hide. It roared, a deafening sound that shook the arena, but it didn't stop. It didn't fall. Instead, it spun on its heels, launching itself toward me with a fury I hadn't expected. I barely had time to react. The creature's claws slashed through the air, catching me across the chest. Pain exploded in my side as I was thrown to the ground, the air knocked out of me. I struggled to breathe, the weight of the blow leaving me gasping for air. I could hear the others yelling, but their voices were muffled, distant. Everything slowed as I watched the creature loom over me, its jaws opening wide, preparing to finish the job. There was no way I could outrun it. No way I could fight back. I felt the cold sweat on my forehead, my hand instinctively reaching for my sidearm, but it was too far out of reach. And then, as if by some miracle, Thompson was there. He threw himself in front of me, firing his rifle at point-blank range into the creature's chest. The creature screeched in pain, stumbling back just enough for Thompson to grab me by the arm and pull me to safety. I didn't have time to thank him. We were still in the fight, and every second counted. The creature was stumbling, its movements sluggish now, its injuries slowing it down. But it wasn't finished yet. "Keep it up," Ruiz shouted, rallying the squad. "We've almost got it." Campbell took the shot this time, aiming for the creature's exposed neck. The bullet struck true, and with a deafening roar, the creature collapsed to the ground, its massive body crumpling with a thud that echoed throughout the arena. For a moment, everything was still. The silence was absolute, the air thick with the smell of blood and sweat. We had done it. We had killed the beast. But the victory felt hollow. The adrenaline was still pumping through my veins, my heart racing, but I knew this wasn't over. It couldn't be. We had survived this round, but I could hear the shifting of metal in the distance, the sound of another door opening. Something else was coming. The game wasn't finished yet. And this time, we weren't going to be the ones doing the hunting. We were the prey. Again. The oppressive silence of the arena hung in the air as the creature's body crumpled to the ground, its twitching form leaving the smell of death and blood in the atmosphere. We stood there, weapons in hand, our breath ragged from the exertion. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to feel the weight of what we'd just accomplished. We had killed it. We had won. But that victory felt short-lived. The creature's massive body lay in a heap, its glowing eyes slowly dimming, but something about the scene felt wrong. The audience above remained silent, unmoving, and the eerie hum of the technology that surrounded the arena seemed to grow louder. It was as if the aliens watching us were savoring the moment, waiting for us to lower our guard. I could hear the door on the opposite side of the arena beginning to shift. It wasn't the same one we'd fought the first creature through. It was much larger, far more menacing. The floor vibrated beneath our feet, the ground trembling with the approach of something else. Something bigger. "Lee, stay alert," Sergeant Ruiz barked, his voice sharp as he motioned for us to fall back toward the center of the arena. The moment the creature had fallen, the door had opened again. The game wasn't over. It never would be. I wiped the sweat from my brow, tightening my grip on my rifle, every nerve in my body screaming that this was far from over. We were in the arena now, but the real fight hadn't even begun. The door at the far side of the arena opened fully, revealing the silhouette of something massive. It took a few moments for the creature to step into the light, and when it did, the collective breath of my squad caught in our throats. It was unlike anything we had seen before. It towered over us, easily 15 feet tall, with a long, serpentine body covered in thick, armored scales. Its eyes were a deep, glowing red, burning with a hunger that sent a cold shiver down my spine. Each of its 6 legs ended in vicious, sharp talons, claws that could tear through metal as easily as paper. Its body was a mass of sinew and muscle, thick and coiled, with a grace that belied its size. We were all silent, the enormity of what we were up against sinking in. This wasn't just a creature, it was a monstrosity, an apex predator. And we were its next meal. It was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. It wasn't just big, it was terrifying. It stalked toward us slowly, methodically, its red eyes locking onto each one of us, sizing us up. It was clear that it wasn't rushing. It was savoring the moment. It knew it could take its time. It could toy with us. "Form up," Ruiz commanded, his voice steady despite the fear that I could see flickering in his eyes. We formed a tight perimeter, backing into a corner of the arena, our weapons trained on the incoming threat. The creature's breath was heavy, like the sound of a steam engine, and each step it took shook the ground beneath us. I could feel the tremors deep in my chest, like a constant drumbeat signaling our impending doom. But we couldn't show fear. Not now. Not when we had a chance to take this thing down. "We can do this. We can kill it just like the last one," Campbell muttered, more to himself than anyone else, but his words grounded me. It was true. We had beaten the odds before. The previous creature had seemed impossible to defeat, but we had survived. That had to count for something. I glanced around at my squad. Ruiz, Thompson, and Campbell. They were all ready, eyes steely with determination, weapons steady, but we were all thinking the same thing. This was different. The first creature had been formidable, but it had its weaknesses. This new monstrosity, we didn't know anything about it. The creature lunged suddenly, faster than I'd expected. Its massive tail whipped toward us, sweeping the ground and sending a cloud of dust into the air. We scattered, ducking out of the way just in time as the tail crashed into the ground with a force that rattled the arena. It was clear we weren't going to outpace it. The thing was faster, stronger, and more agile than we could ever be. But we couldn't just run. That was the wrong move. We had to fight. We had no other choice. "Shoot the legs! The joints!" I yelled, trying to keep my voice steady, even as my own fear bubbled up. The creature's legs were huge, but they were its only point of mobility. If we took those out, we might be able to cripple it. We opened fire in unison, our shots ringing out like a chorus of defiance. The creature hissed, rearing back as the rounds impacted its legs, but it didn't fall. It screeched in pain, its claws slashing at the ground, kicking up dust and debris as it turned toward us with an angry snarl. "It's not enough," Thompson shouted, his voice barely audible over the creature's roar. "We need to hit its head." But the head was nearly impossible to reach. The creature kept its defenses high, shielding its face with the massive armor that covered its body. We kept firing, but each shot seemed to only make it angrier. It was clear we weren't making a dent. Then I saw it. The weakness. A soft patch of exposed flesh just beneath its chin, a spot where the scales didn't cover. It was small, but it was there. I raised my rifle, lined up the shot, and fired. The bullet struck the spot with a sickening thud, and for a moment the creature froze, its eyes widening as if it hadn't anticipated being wounded. But then, as if sensing its vulnerability, it howled, and the ground beneath us shook. We had triggered something deeper, something inside the creature that we didn't understand. The creature's howl reverberated through the arena, echoing off the metal walls with a bone-rattling intensity. The ground beneath us trembled as its massive body recoiled from the shot. For a split second, I thought we might have done it, thought we had struck the killing blow, but then its glowing red eyes locked onto me, and I saw the rage in them. This thing was far from finished. The beast roared in fury, a guttural sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It reared back, its massive claws scraping the arena floor with an ear-splitting screech. My heart pounded in my chest, but there was no time for hesitation. The moment we had struck, we had drawn its full attention, and it was now coming for us with the kind of rage only a wounded predator could muster. "Move!" Ruiz shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. We scattered, each of us taking cover behind whatever we could find. Metal pillars, jagged rocks that dotted the arena floor, and whatever debris was scattered around us. The creature's massive tail swept across the ground, knocking aside chunks of debris and sending dust swirling into the air. It was clear now. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a battle of wills, and we were outmatched in size, strength, and sheer terror. I crouched behind a piece of broken stone, trying to catch my breath as I checked my rifle. My hands were shaking from the adrenaline, but I forced myself to focus. My mind raced. We couldn't outrun it, not with that kind of speed, and we couldn't just keep firing blindly. We needed to be strategic. We had to keep the pressure on it, exploit its weaknesses until we had the chance to finish it off. The creature charged again, its claws ripping through the air in a blur. It was faster than I had expected, moving with a predatory grace that belied its massive size. We had no time to think. The creature was relentless, its rage-fueled assault threatening to tear us apart. We had to work as a unit if we were going to make it out of here alive. "Keep firing!" Ruiz yelled, his voice steady as he shot again, aiming for the exposed underbelly of the creature. His shot landed, but it wasn't enough. The beast only shrieked in pain, its thick hide barely budging under the impact. I watched as the creature turned, its focus shifting between us, its movements almost calculating now. It had learned from our last strike. It knew we were hunting for its weaknesses, and it was adapting. I took a deep breath and looked around. Campbell was pinned against the far wall, trying to reload his weapon while avoiding the creature's attention. Thompson was on the opposite side, throwing firepower at the creature as it advanced on him, its tail snapping viciously at the air. We were cornered, outgunned, and running out of options. That's when I saw it. A massive structure looming in the far corner of the arena. A large, elevated platform surrounded by a series of glowing lights. It wasn't just a piece of decoration. There was something familiar about it, something that screamed of utility. It was a trap. Maybe designed for something or someone, but in that moment, it was our only hope. "Over there!" I shouted, pointing toward the platform. "We need to get to that platform." Ruiz nodded sharply, his gaze flicking between the creature and the distant structure. Without another word, he bolted toward the corner, his legs pumping as he sprinted with the kind of desperation only a soldier facing death can muster. "Cover him!" I ordered. Thompson and Campbell followed, their fire focused on the creature, trying to keep its attention away from Ruiz as he dashed across the arena. The creature growled, clearly unwilling to let us escape, but we had a plan now. If we could make it to that platform, we might be able to find something, anything, that could turn the tide in our favor. The creature roared again, its massive form charging forward, but Ruiz had already reached the base of the platform. He climbed quickly, pulling himself up as the beast lunged toward him. The impact of its massive claws against the ground shook the entire arena, and I could feel the reverberations all the way to my bones. But Ruiz had made it. He was on the platform, and from his position, he had a clear shot at the creature's head. "Nah!" Ruiz yelled, and we all opened fire. The creature staggered back, its movements slowing as the barrage of bullets hit it from all sides. We had it. It was injured, its body writhing in pain as we landed shot after shot, hitting its joints, its exposed areas. It tried to swipe at us, but the damage was starting to take its toll. We had forced it into a corner. And that was when it happened. The creature began to collapse, its massive body finally succumbing to the onslaught. The final shot, fired from Ruiz's vantage point on the platform, hit its head directly between the eyes, and the beast's body went limp, crashing to the ground with an earth-shaking thud. We stood there for a moment staring at the lifeless form of the creature, our chests heaving with exhaustion, our weapons still trained on the body, just in case. I could hardly believe it. We had done it. We had killed the thing. We had survived. But I couldn't help the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. This victory was temporary. The aliens above us were watching, waiting, and the next challenge would come. The next fight was already on the horizon, and we had to be ready. The game wasn't over yet. The creature's body lay still on the arena floor, a testament to our struggle, but the silence that followed felt like the calm before a storm. We stood in the aftermath, panting, our hearts racing from the fight. The adrenaline coursed through us, but beneath that rush was an unsettling awareness. The arena wasn't done with us yet. I kept my rifle trained on the lifeless form of the beast, unwilling to let my guard down. I couldn't afford to. The alien spectators above, their unseen eyes on us, were waiting for the next move. They weren't here for our victories. They were here to see if we could survive the next round. "Check your ammo, check your gear," Ruiz barked, breaking the silence as he moved swiftly, his eyes scanning the perimeter. His voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. Even though we'd taken down one monstrous foe, it didn't mean we were safe. This was their game, and the rules could change in an instant. I reloaded my rifle mechanically, the weight of the weapon comforting in my hands as I performed the familiar task. The others did the same, our movements sharp, but there was a shared sense of unease among us. We had faced an unimaginable force and survived, But that victory meant nothing here. The aliens were not done with us. I glanced at the walls surrounding the arena, looking for any sign of the next challenge. The place was silent now, almost too silent, as if the arena itself was holding its breath. And then, without warning, the ground beneath us rumbled again, and a massive wall slid open on the opposite side. A new set of creatures emerged. Not just one, but several. Their forms were different from the previous beasts, but no less terrifying. These were smaller, more agile, with sleek reptilian bodies covered in tough chitinous plating. They moved in perfect unison, their glowing eyes scanning us like predators studying their prey. There were at least 10 of them, circling us with fluid, deliberate movements. They didn't roar like the others. They didn't need to. They were calculating, observant, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. We were surrounded. "All back to the center," Ruiz shouted, his voice a harsh command as he moved with practiced speed to the middle of the arena. The rest of us followed, keeping our backs to each other as we huddled into a tight formation. The creatures were fast, and we knew that they wouldn't hesitate to attack the moment they saw an opening. I could feel the sweat beading on my brow again, and this time it wasn't from the heat of the battle. It was from the creeping fear of knowing that we were not the ones in control anymore. The arena was designed to break us, to test our limits, and it had been doing exactly that. I could see it in the others' faces. The exhaustion, the fear, but also the grit. The determination that had kept us alive so far. I had no illusions. These creatures weren't going to fight fair. They weren't going to give us time to plan, to strategize. They were moving in, their eyes focused, and it was only a matter of time before they attacked. "Hold your fire until they're within range," Ruiz ordered, keeping his voice steady. We all nodded, understanding the plan. These creatures were fast, too fast for us to take them out from a distance. We needed to wait until they were close, too close for them to escape. I swallowed hard, the anticipation building in my chest as the creatures drew closer. The light from above cast shadows across their bodies, making them appear even more sinister, their muscles coiling in anticipation. I could hear the soft scraping of their claws on the arena floor, and every second felt like an eternity. Then, in a blur of motion, one of the creatures lunged forward. It was fast. Too fast. But we were ready. "No!" Ruiz screamed, and we all opened fire at once. The roar of our weapons echoed across the arena, and for a brief moment the creatures scattered, their movements jerky as they tried to dodge the barrage of bullets. But there were too many of them. One by one, we took them down, hitting their exposed joints, their weak spots. But even as we dropped one, another took its place, the relentless assault never letting up. The creatures were like a swarm, circling in, testing our defenses. I could see the wariness in my squad mates' faces. Their movements were slower, their shots less precise. We were running out of time. We were running out of energy. Then I saw it. A gap in their formation. A weak spot in the center where 3 of the creatures were converging, leaving their backs exposed. I didn't hesitate. I pointed, signaling to Ruiz. "Take them out, now," I yelled. Ruiz saw the opening and took the shot. His rifle rang out and one of the creatures dropped to the ground, its body convulsing before it went still. We all focused our fire on the remaining 2, hitting them in the vulnerable spots we had identified in the previous battles. It wasn't easy. They were still fast, still dangerous, but we were getting better at anticipating their movements. Slowly but surely, we began to chip away at them. In the end, it was the last creature that made the fatal mistake. It lunged at Campbell, but it miscalculated, and he was able to sidestep its strike, firing a single shot that hit it square in the head. The creature's body collapsed, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the arena fell silent. We had done it. We had survived. But I didn't allow myself to celebrate. Not yet. Because the sound of the door opening again, the slow, mechanical hum that followed it, told me that this was only one more test, one more challenge. The arena wouldn't stop. It couldn't. We had no illusions anymore. We were alive for now, but that was all.